My name is Sister Margaret, and I was born on a crisp June morning in 1946 in the quiet village of Lourdes, France. From the earliest age I felt a calling stronger than any childhood dream. By 16 I entered the convent walls as a postulant, and before I turned 30 I had taken my final vows. For 55 years I rose each dawn to chant the divine office, my voice carrying over dew-damp gardens where roses climbed ancient stone walls. I taught catechism and cared for orphan children whose eyes held more sorrow than words could speak. I tenderly fed them porridge at sunrise, held their trembling hands at night, and whispered prayers of hope when their tears stole sleep. My faith was the cornerstone of every breath I drew. I embraced poverty, chastity, and obedience as holy gifts, offering my body and soul as a living prayer. I wore the simple habit of my order like armor, its soft wool a daily reminder that my life belonged entirely to God's will. I never doubted the path laid before me, even as years made my spine ache and my hands tremble. Each wrinkle in my face told of 1,000 answered prayers, and 1,000 more yet to be uttered. On February 12, 2025, at precisely 4:17 a.m., my world shifted. I was driving an old sedan along a winding country road near the convent when a deer leapt into my path. I braked hard, the wheels skidding across frost-glazed asphalt. The impact sent me spinning into a wooden post. Light and darkness collided behind my eyes, and my body convulsed in pain so deep it felt like my very soul might fracture. In those fractured moments, I hovered between life and death. As the world dissolved into silence, I felt hands not of flesh but of pure warmth lifting me higher. In that liminal space I glimpsed the edges of eternity, shadows and light entwined, a tapestry of memory and promise. My body lay crumpled by the roadside, but my spirit soared beyond the convent gates, beyond country lanes, beyond every whispered prayer I had ever offered. That near-death experience unraveled everything I believed about suffering and mercy. It left me both terrified and transfixed, as if every whispered hymn I had sung was only the prelude to a chapter one had not yet begun. And in that space between heartbeat and stillness, I tasted a mystery I could never unlearn. When my vision cleared, I found myself standing at the threshold of a vast, merciless expanse. Flames danced along jagged rock walls that arched overhead like broken ribs, their heat shredding the air into suffocating waves. The ground beneath my feet was fractured obsidian, each crevice glowing with molten orange veins that pulsed like angry hearts. A sulphurous mist curled around my ankles, carrying the metallic tang of blood and the acrid sting of burning incense long forgotten. Far ahead, a ruined cathedral rose from the blackened earth, its shattered stained glass windows spilling distorted rainbows onto pools of glowing lava. The pews inside were collapsed into grotesque splinters, and the altar lay overturned, its golden chalice fused to a jagged altar stone by endless fire. The hush of that desecrated sanctuary was broken by distant, echoing chants, ghostly hymns twisted into wails of agony that crawled beneath my skin. I stumbled forward, each step weighed down by invisible chains that dragged across the cracked floor. The walls shifted as if alive, ancient stone bones grinding together in a slow, mocking rhythm. Shadows writhed between pillars that bled molten rock, taking on vaguely human shapes that reached out with clawed hands before dissolving into drifting embers. Every breath I drew tasted of ash and sorrow, as though the very air mourned the souls trapped within this blasphemous kingdom. To my left, a bridge of fractured marble spanned a river of orange fire. The molten currents churned like living serpents, their scales flickering with sparks that hissed upon contact with the ash-clotted air. I could hear distant screams carried on the wind, moments of terror unspooling somewhere beyond my sight. The sky overhead was a churning orb of black smoke and dying stars, so heavy it pressed down on my chest like judgment itself. Despite the horror, an eerie curiosity propelled me onward. I reached out to touch the bridge's scorched railing, its surface warm and brittle under my trembling fingertips. In that instant, the flames on the far shore parted to reveal a darkened courtyard framed by crumbling statues, angels with broken wings and faces carved into expressions of eternal despair. Their stone eyes seemed to follow my every move, bearing witness to my intrusion. A distant clang resonated through the air. Iron doors swinging open somewhere ahead, inviting me into deeper darkness. The air grew colder and denser, as if the world itself recoiled from light. Yet in that suffocating gloom, I felt an unsettling clarity. This place was a mirror of every doubt I had ever buried, a realm constructed from the shadows of my own faith. Here, the boundary between sinner and saint had been erased, leaving only raw souls exposed to merciless reckoning. I stood on the threshold of that iron gateway, heart pounding, breath ragged with terror and awe. Beyond lay the true heart of damnation, where the next chapter of my ordeal, and my reckoning, would unfold. I felt the iron doors groan shut behind me, sealing off any hope of retreat. The torchlight here, if you could call it that, flickered from braziers hung by chains like tortured pendulums, casting my distorted shadow across slick obsidian tiles. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, hands pressed against the cold stone as if it might anchor me back to reality. Instead, a tremor ran through the ground, and the tiles fractured beneath my palms. A low rumble echoed through the hall, growing to a roar as the ceiling cracked open. Blackened rubble fell in slow-motion arcs, releasing showers of sparks that hissed like serpents. I covered my face, but ash found every pore. It tasted like regret. When I dared to look again, the chamber had shifted. The walls bowed inward, groaning as if alive, and the archways stretched skyward into infinity, revealing a void roiling with crimson clouds. I tried to stand, but invisible hands seized my ankles. They pulled me backward, dragging me toward a yawning pit whose edges were lined with skeletal figures chained by sinew-thick cables. Their hollow eyes flickered with yellow lamplight, and they whispered fragments of my past. Moments I thought forgiven, words I had spoken in anger, secrets I had buried beneath years of prayer. My heart pounded so fiercely I could hear it drown out the whispers. As I was pulled toward the pit's edge, I felt skin burn where the chains bit into flesh. Pain so immediate that I gasped, drawing in bone-chilling air. Below me, the abyss roared like a beast awoken. I glimpsed shapes writhing in that bottomless darkness, hands reaching upward, mouths open in silent screams, bodies contorted in agony. My throat constricted with fear and sorrow. Through the haze of panic, I noticed figures beyond the edge. Fellow sisters from my convent, the gentle Sister Agnes, Mother Superior Claire, even the children I'd nurtured. They hovered just out of reach, their faces etched with pity and accusation. Sister Agnes's lips moved, but all I heard was the echo of my own worst doubts. Did you live for them, or for your own sense of holiness? An electric crack split the air. The floor trembled and sank, and I tumbled forward, arms clawing at empty air. Time stretched. For a heartbeat I flew, suspended between reckoning and oblivion. I saw my life flash. Every hymn I'd sung, every tear I'd wiped, every prayer I'd offered in faith's quiet cathedral. Then came the plunge, an infinite fall into silent blackness. I braced myself for impact, but there was no collision, only oblivion. My mind screamed, yet my body felt nothing. In that suspension, I realized this descent was more than physical. It was a reckoning of every doubt, every unspoken desire, every hidden regret. As the void closed in, I tasted tears I had never shed and heard confessions I had never voiced. And then, just as the darkness threatened to consume me entirely, a soft warmth threaded through the void, a single note of song, distant yet unmistakable. Ave Maria. It held a promise I did not yet understand but would soon confront in the depths ahead, that I was torn from the drifting void by a sudden flare of hellfire that licked at my bones like a living predator. My body convulsed in agony, and I found myself chained upright in a vast amphitheater of flame-wreathed pillars. The air vibrated with the anguished cries of 1,000 damned souls, each voice a dagger twisting in my heart. As I forced my eyes open, I saw the twisted faces of people I once loved, Sister Agnes clutching a broken rosary, Mother Superior Claire's gown melting into ember. Even little Jean, the orphan boy I'd cradled, now hollow-eyed and wailing. Their eyes were not of forgiveness but accusation. and their silent stares shattered every fragment of peace I had carried. Chains of phosphorus blue light bound my wrists and ankles to scorched stone. I looked down at my habit, singed and torn, the fabric stiff as carrion. A jagged shard of obsidian hovered before me, rotating slowly, its edge glimmering like a malicious grin. It drew closer until I could see my reflection. Face ashen, eyes wide with horror, hair singed into charcoal spikes. A voice, ancient and mocking, whispered in my ear. You taught them love, but did you love yourself? You taught them mercy, but did you spare your own soul? I wanted to scream, but ash filled my throat. The amphitheater crowd parted to reveal my own memories projected onto drifting cinders. The day I refused Sister Agnes's plea to pray for a dying child because I was too exhausted. The moment I caught myself resenting the burden of their orphan trust. The silent anger that flared when Mother Superior praised my obedience while chastising others. Each memory stabbed me like a hot poker, and I realized how many times my kindness had been a performance to mask my pride. Then came the worst reckoning. The obsidian shard drew blood from my forehead, and the pain unlocked deeper confessions. I saw myself standing at the altar in midnight oil, reciting prayers more out of habit than conviction. I recalled nights when I envied the freedom of lay people, even as I comforted them. Occasions when I dwelled on how my sacrifice made me holier than my peers. Tears I had never allowed myself to shed pooled in my eyes as I mourned every subtle betrayal of my own vows. As I writhed against my chains, the platform beneath me descended. I realized this was not mere punishment. It was a confrontation with the truest parts of my soul. The flames parted to reveal a circle of hooded figures. My fellow novices, the children, the gardeners, each one a flickering apparition of trust one had broken. Their faces were calm, almost compassionate, but their eyes reflected the pain I had buried. The lead figure stepped forward and pulled back its hood. It was me, older, wearier, eyes hollowed by judgment. My doppelganger spoke without moving lips. All your prayers, your fasts, your kindness, were they for God or for the glow in your own heart when others praised you? The question struck me to the core. I shook my head, silent tears tracing paths down soot-streaked cheeks. The hooded me advanced, lifting a flaming chalice that brimmed with blackened water, the bitter dregs of every unspoken thought and hidden resentment. They poured it over my head. The liquid hissed as it met my skin, seeping into my pores and flooding my mind with every selfish motive I had ever suppressed. The world blurred, and I felt my spirit fracture under the weight of truth. In that shattering moment, every hope of sanctity I'd clung to evaporated like dew in hell's fire. I was raw, exposed, utterly broken. And then, deeper than the flame's roar, I heard a single unwavering voice call my name, soft, tender, unyielding. It was a lifeline I had forgotten even existed. In the midst of despair, that voice promised a reckoning beyond retribution. But to reach it, I would first have to surrender every illusion I had built around my faith. As the hooded figures closed in, I braced myself for the final trial. The awakening that awaited after all hope was lost, that I felt zinc clatter as the floor beneath me split open, depositing my frail body onto jagged stones. Flames licked at my ankles, yet I sensed no pain, only the weight of 1,000 silent judgments. Chains of glowing ember wrapped around my wrists, hauling me upright before a circle of wavering figures. Each bore the face of someone I thought I had loved. Sister Agnes with hollow cheeks, Mother Superior Claire's eyes rimmed in sorrow, and little Jean's gaze empty as a well without water. A voice like grinding iron echoed through the cavern. You who taught mercy, have you shown it to yourself? The words slammed into me, and memories I'd buried surfaced in cinders drifting through the air. I saw the sick child whose fever I prayed over only because duty demanded it. I recalled the night I scolded an orphan's desperate plea for comfort when exhaustion clouded my compassion. I felt the sting of pride when villagers praised my sacrifice, even as loneliness festered in my heart. The figures closed in, their forms flickering between saint and accuser. Each step they took scorched the ground, and with every footfall, I heard my own failures whispered back to me. You wore your habit like armor, they hissed. But did it shield your soul or hide your pride? I pressed trembling palms against my chest, where faith and hubris fought a silent battle. Tears I'd never allowed washed over my cheeks, carving rivulets of ash. At the circle's center hovered a black mirror, its surface shimmering with every unspoken doubt I carried. Drawn by a force I could not name, I reached out. Instantly, the mirror's surface rippled, and I faced my reflection. Hollow-eyed, spirit fractured, habit in tatters. The voice boomed once more. This is your truth. Accept it. With a cry that echoed like thunder, I collapsed to my knees, the chains clattering as they slackened. My spirit trembled on the brink of oblivion. Every hope I'd clung to shattered by my own hidden darkness. The world narrowed to the sound of my ragged breath, and the beating of a heart desperate for mercy. Then, a single beam of pale light pierced the blackness, illuminating tears of repentance on my face, and guiding me toward the promise of forgiveness that awaited beyond this crucible of despair. That a sudden hush fell over the infernal amphitheater as a brilliant column of pure white light descended from above. The scorching heat abdicated for an instant, replaced by a stillness so profound it stung my ears. From the radiance emerged a figure robed in luminescent white, feet unmarked by fire and eyes burning with gentle authority. He stood before me as if stepped from all the prayers I had ever whispered, every hymn I had sung. Margaret, his voice rang clear, neither echoing nor distant, but resonating within my very bones. The chains of ember at my wrists snapped and fell away, scattering sparks that hissed into smoky oblivion. His presence melted away the accusing faces around me. Even the molten pillars bowed their flames toward his feet. He knelt in the ashen dust, reaching out a hand that glowed like dawn's first ray. Touching my forehead, he whispered words older than time itself. I have never abandoned you. Your doubts were trials, not condemnations. In that single touch, every shard of self-reproach dissolved. I felt a warmth bloom in my chest, radiating outward until it filled every chamber of my heart. Desire, he said softly, when pure, is not a sin but a gift of creation. Yet unguarded it can wound the soul. His eyes searched mine, not with judgment but compassion. I forbid none of my children true love. I forbid only what would harm them. As his light receded, the flames returned, but they no longer threatened me. Instead, they danced in harmony with his promise. That even in hell's darkest depth, mercy's flame can never be extinguished. My eyes fluttered open to the delirious haze of a hospital corridor. Machines beeped around me, and sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains. I tried to lift my hand but felt the ache of broken bones and singed skin. Memories of hell's fire and Jesus's touch collided in my mind, igniting a tumult of awe and shame. As nurses tended my wounds, I realized my faith had transformed. The vows I once wore like armor now felt brittle. The commandments I'd recited by rote now rang with new urgency. I drifted between prayers of gratitude and questions that burned hotter than any flame. Was my devotion hollow? Had I loved God or applauded my own sacrifice? In the quiet of my hospital room, I clasped a rosary and wept. Not for pain, but for the pride I'd carried. Each bead whispered forgiveness, yet each prayer forced me to confront the desires I'd denied and the doubts I'd repressed. My heart trembled between fear and hope, as if two currents pulled my soul apart. In that fragile space, I sensed a merciful presence guiding me toward a faith that welcomed brokenness. And though the struggle raged within, I felt for the first time an honest yearning to rebuild my spirit on truth rather than ritual. As I recovered, I felt a quiet stirring in my soul, a call beyond the convent walls. No longer content with ritual alone, I yearned to understand desire's true purpose. I began journaling questions once forbidden, seeking wisdom from scripture and lived stories. Each entry became a prayer for balance between heart and spirit. In this new quest, I would guide others wounded by dogma toward a faith rooted in compassion and honest longing. When I finally left the hospital, the convent gates welcomed me like an old friend. But inside, I was not the same Sister Margaret who once sought perfection through ritual. My heart now bore the mark of grace tempered by fire. I introduced new prayers at dawn, prayers that honored both purity and the complexity of human longing. I shared my journey in gentle talks with the novice sisters, urging them to embrace doubt as a pathway to deeper faith. The orphan children noticed my softer smile, and the way I lingered to listen to their joys and fears. I taught them that compassion flourishes when we acknowledge our wounds. In every whispered hymn, I now wove in a note of honest confession. Lord, guide my desires toward your love. My life's work expanded beyond stone walls. I traveled to neighboring villages, holding circles where laypeople and clergy alike could speak their hidden struggles without fear. Each story I heard, each tear I dried, reminded me that true holiness rises from vulnerability. Though I survived that day at the roadside by what doctors called a miracle, I know the greater miracle was the reckoning in hell's depths and the illumination that followed. Now, I walk forward on a path where gratitude and humility guide every step, inviting others to journey with me into the light that shines even in the darkest places.